We have our plenary panel on emerging technologies, moderated by Sam Vahie, Chief Strategy Officer at Advatix. Please welcome our panelists up to the stage.
Thank you, and welcome to the Emerging Technologies in Supply Chain panel. My name is Sam Vahie. I'm with Advatix, Chief Consulting and Strategy Officer for Advatix. We've got three panelists here that are in person, and we've got two virtual that should be joining us shortly. Our panel today is going to focus on technology in the COVID era as well as the post-COVID era. And we wanted to focus our discussions around supply chain, specifically around the innovations, the challenges that we're facing, as well as some of the areas where there's been cross-industry collaboration, along with the investments that we've seen skyrocket in this area. All of a sudden, supply chain tech became really, really cool. So it's been a fun time to be in supply chain and fun time to be in tech as well. We've got a great set of panelists here, as well as those that are joining us virtually. We've got, let the panelists introduce themselves. Manju, you want to start off?
Thank you, Sam. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be with everybody here in the room, as well as the panelists. Like Sam said, timing could not have been better, whether you're graduating or running a business or solving problems for your customers. What we do at Pluto 7 is we get hired for working with our customers to innovate, to bring data insights. What that really translates into is setting up platform. You heard a couple of folks from Google talk today. We work side by side. We take our solutions, solving supply chain and logistics problems, using their internal and external data, and give them insights. So that's at the heart of it. When you look at COVID and the disruption that it caused, it accelerated a need for the transformation, which is probably planned 2-3 years out, inward. Not only it accelerated, but also the scale and complexity has grown with COVID, because the scenario that we just saw in the last 12 months, very, very few people probably could have predicted that. Now the world has to move on. That's our job. Okay.
Thank you. Manju, Rob, would you introduce?
Happy to, Sam. Thanks. Rob Haney, my company is Clockwork Logistics. We are a true venture-backed startup. We just completed our seed round, so still early in the journey. We have investors, prestigious investors, including Maersk Growth, PSA Unbox, Newtown Ventures out of Africa, global investors for a globally minded startup. Our goal is to help digitize contracted carriage, and for the students, that means the connection from a big global shipper through a digital contract, tender, dispatch, and delivery with your network of truck carriers globally. So that's the platform we do at Clockwork.
Eric?
Awesome. Thank you. Eric Fullerton, Project 44. So I'll start by talking a little bit, just briefly, about what Project 44 does and why I'm here chatting about emerging technology. But at the most, the terminology we use is it's a real-time visibility platform for shipments and orders. I like to say it helps our customers know where most of their stuff is most of the time. And we know how important that is, because when you know where your goods are and where your shipments are and where your cargo is, you're able to make the right business decisions by adding that intelligence to the way that you're able to execute your business process. So for us, we like to think of ourselves as kind of that connective tissue, bringing in all this data and information from lots of different systems. We have this massive carrier network, hundreds of thousands of carriers, over 700 customers. We're able to take that data and then make help our customers make intelligent decisions about supply chain. So it's an exciting time for us as well, seeing a lot of growth and interest around the visibility space.
Thank you, Eric. And let's go to our panelists that are virtual. Emanuel, would you start us off? We don't have sound.
This process of have a slight sort of attention to the supply chain IT. We deliver an event repository for the tracking and tracing of finished goods. We deliver technology both to governments, who collect data from the entire industry about all the items used in certain verticals, as we also do to industry, for them to collect this data from their factories, warehouses, etc. So highly scalable software solutions brought to both industry and government. And supply chain, of course, being a large part of this. We see quite a lot of opportunity in using the technologies that we've built for other purposes. Happy to be participating.
Thank you, Emanuel. And Aljosja, last but not least, could you introduce yourself, please?
Of course, thanks, Sam. My name is Aljosja Beije, and I'm the director of BlockLab. BlockLab is an emerging technologies lab and venture studio. It currently has around 45 employees, including 2 spin-outs. It's owned by Rotterdam and was created to foster the application of emerging technologies within the port industrial complex. We're about to launch our interoperability software platform, Advatix, and its first service, eConnect, and both of them are underpinned by machine learning and blockchain technology. I'm also co-author of the book Blockchain and the Supply Chain with Vahie and Haney. With my thoughts, the MBA class, which are technologies in the supply chain, and here at Manjunath Logistics.
Thank you, Aljosja. I think we've lost your video, but I'm sure we'll get it back. Again, thank you for being here. Appreciate all the panelists here. We can go to that next slide. What we've tried to do is create some sort of structure. We'll be talking about the next one, please. What we're going to be talking about, we've structured this discussion into 3 areas. The first one being around sourcing through sale, the physical infrastructure, and how technology has played a role in that. We'll be talking about the challenges associated with that, the innovations, the cross-industry collaboration, as well as a lot of the investments that we're seeing in that space. We've also got a second area that we'll start to focus in, and we've got a few panelists that are focused in that area around logistics, where we can talk about the inbound side of the logistics, the outbound side of logistics, and how that breaks up and where technology is really playing a role. And last but not least, the planning side of it, which kind of connects all the pieces together, putting the physical together with the supply chain and the logistics, and trying to actually accelerate some of that development, especially given some of the challenges that we've been facing during the COVID era. So with that, to start things off, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to actually have Aljosja, I know we had talked when we originally met with you around how you're using blockchain from a sourcing standpoint, as well as the physical tracking of products across the supply chain. So what are your thoughts, and what are some of the challenges that we're seeing in this COVID era?
Yeah, I think what we have all experienced is that how brittle supply chains are throughout this period. It's really in very particular areas and where we see that digitization is now rapidly changing the way supply chains are run. I think COVID really made very clear that the use of paper documents is not something of 2021 anymore. We see now all of a sudden on a global scale the rollout of electronic bill of lading. I had the pleasure in end of March to explain to our Minister of Infrastructure in the Netherlands how tokenization and using non-fungible tokens could allow digital transfer of ownership of an electronic bill of lading. And that's something I don't think would have been possible a couple of years ago And I think that acceleration was caused by COVID. And in general, I think disruptions, and I'm also looking at, for example, Brexit, are actually a breeding ground for innovation. The UK left the European Union, and all of a sudden, the old rule book is torn apart, and that leaves tremendous opportunities for digitization. What we are focusing on right now, and what we are working on going live, is an application that does fully automated customs clearance. So I think in general, COVID has been a big catalyst and a big accelerator for digital change. At least that's the way we experienced it.
Like the perspective of saying, oh, you know, this is, and I'm not trying to disagree necessarily, but, you know, COVID is the cause. I feel like it's more just like the final spark in this scenario. It's exposing a lot of the challenges that we already knew to exist. And there's kind of this perfect storm today around customer expectations. As consumers, we're obsessed with convenience, and we've been treated to a specific type of experience. And we expect that to operate in every aspect of our lives. And the global supply chain, we always like to refer to it as the global supply chain, as if it's this one big thing that was always built to work together incredibly cohesively. It's not really the case. The way that you source goods in Brazil is different than the way you do so in the UK. The way that you ship or find specific carriers is different in Europe than it is in the US. And it's this incredibly complex piece. And then now I think what we're also seeing is that a lot of the technology that was being used was fine for when that technology was instituted, but that may have been 30 or 40 years ago. And when that strain around capacity is added, compiled by COVID, it's just this perfect storm of challenges to face.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we think that some of these were already things that were in motion prior to COVID and they just accelerated? Or are they new things that came up during the COVID era that we're seeing where technologies really played a role? Any thoughts from the panelists?
No, there's no doubt that the change we've all lived through related to CEP, right, Courier, Express, Parcel, has a reverberating effect up into the global supply chain. There's no doubt. But what you have to be aware of is that McKinsey would value the CEP market at 300 billion, while the global supply chain is 2.2 trillion. It's a much bigger market, and it's a lot harder to disrupt. And it's also had a lot less venture capital. So I think that the market forces that were at work, which include changes in the consumer behavior and the driver shortages everybody's talking about, were already at work. We were already tracking that, and then it certainly was accelerated by COVID. Yeah.
COVID could not have come at a worse time.
Or better time.
Yeah, I guess.
So I think we touched on labor and other aspects. Emanuel, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this. I know this is an area that you've been familiar with as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the and I'll just echo that it has been an amplifying factor is that we see not only within the industry and that there is I think it's perfectly correct that a lot of these problems or a lot of these challenges they existed pre-COVID. But the fact that the COVID incident, if you will, has sparked a lot of initiatives, and some of these are even on state or country level. And once a country starts requesting further insights into its not its own supply chains, obviously, but the supply chains of its industries, it can have that create that perfect storm by means of everybody needing to comply with some kind of regulation, or at least work in a cohesive way, which may not have been the situation before, and everybody was waiting for someone else to step up and be the first. But once it's mandated, it becomes a lot easier to do the investment, the relevant investment, to digitize. I think that's a further sort of amplification between authorities and industry.
Right. Thank you. Just wanted to touch a little bit on the cross-industry collaboration. Do we see areas, I mean, I know we've kind of talked about, this is the physical supply chain, so we've talked about logistics and the flow of goods and everything else, warehousing, automation. Are there areas where we're seeing things that we're learning from other industries or other areas that we are now pulling in because of the situations we're in?
Yeah, if I can take a shot at that. We work with many retail, CPG, automobile equipment manufacturers. When you talk about what are they learning from each other, each of these industries, the aspect that we solve is how can we bring more intelligence using data, either the enterprise data or enterprise data combined with public data or the partner data to predict what's going to happen in future, whether it's the demand disruption or a supply availability or a truck availability. They want additional intelligence. Now, what happens is when you go from industry to industry, the top line and bottom line effect of these varies by industries. For example, the effect it has on an omni-channel e-tailer is very different from a CPG company versus somebody else. What it means is these technologies getting adopted will get prioritized accordingly based on the sense of urgency and the impact they have. At the same time, they're all learning from each other. Hey, we have this problem. What does my peer have? What does somebody else have in across industry? What innovation can you bring from there into my mainstream business? Now, the key variable factor here is, while there's also a commonality and a variable is people. Technology is always ready yesterday. It's really about which industry wants to adopt at what scale based on the need and the specific problem they're trying to solve. We have very rarely seen somebody say, oh, we want to enable AI. That conversation might start there, but to solve what? It stops there. Until that part is addressed and why it's better to solve using this technology, it doesn't progress. So in other words, this cross-validation across industry, where has somebody got an ROI? How can I take the DoorDash learning to my Coke distribution or beer distribution? So all these things are learnings are getting applied across industry.
And how is technology enabling some of that? Because I think part of it is also the transitioning, the way in which we're doing technology today, not just software, but everything around technology today is very different from what was the case earlier where you had these siloed products. Today, everything that we're building needs to kind of collaborate and intersect with everything else. So how is that really having an effect?
Yeah, it's interesting. The technologies that people talk when they're while solving a problem while they're in the job versus when they go back home is the same technology. Like, for example, if you take cloud, AI, cameras, just 3 capabilities, right? You see something on the camera, you capture the information, you correlate with text, and you arrive at a conclusion or a decision in a retail setting, whether they're shopping on Amazon.com. Now, the same thing when they go back to their enterprise and solve a similar problem of next day delivery, they think it's incredibly hard. But the moment you start relating and say, hey, here is Google Technologies, as an example. Now, you could do the same thing what Amazon did for your business in your own small way, and you can shift your planning time from 18 hours or to 1 hour. That's a paradigm shift. So now, it's not like they didn't want to do it. They thought it was harder to do it. They thought it will take a lot more money and time to do it. But now when all the urgency kicks in and the money is available in budget and so on, now this technology comes to the forefront.
Were there any other comments before we?
Yeah,
sure.
Slide. I mean, often I think that supply chain is where great technology just goes to die. I mean, how many people lived through the RFID year, right? I mean, I spent so much time in that, and then there's supposed to be all these mandates, and then it's gone, right? So, and if you think about Amazon, what they're doing is they're avoiding existing supply chain technology. They're saying, no, you're going to use our technology that we built here at Amazon, because they can't work with the existing systems, which often there's a good reason, because they're just legacy, right? They're just old. They're like green screen. And our processes are old. And so I think what happens is we get a smart idea like blockchain or AI that comes to the industry. We get all excited about it, but we can't do anything with it because the underlying systems are a mess. And I think often, so I think we have, it's a reality that we have to face as emerging players in this supply chain space.
It's a dangerous game. Like when we talk about blockchain, very real, very valuable. Also one of the biggest buzzwords you could possibly see. Data science / AI / machine learning, everyone loves to talk about it and say, oh, we're gonna bring data science to supply chain. So when I have conversations with customers or people in general, it's always like, okay, so what is your goal? What is your objective? I like to think of the outcomes of using data science or a specific algorithm. And it may be about cleansing your data set and taking in data from multiple different systems that are all legacy, and then being able to resolve that so you have actual accurate information that you're making decisions from. Or it could be about improving the latency, right? We want to be more real time. 36 hours versus 6 hours is a very significant difference. Or it's just about the ability to make educated guesses. And that's where machine learning can be really powerful. You take a clean data set, and then maybe you're able to actually make inferences about where a shipment is going and whether or not it's likely to be delayed based on all of the other times that shipment has taken place. So there's use cases there, but I think it's a dangerous game when we just start talking about those things without the context of what we're trying to achieve, and then just, I could probably talk about data science and the challenge around it for a long time, but
Absolutely. I just
pause
want to give the panelists that are virtual a minute or two. Were there any other comments on this section, or should we move over to the logistics side of things?
I think I'd just say, I agree with Eric's point. Of course, some emerging technologies are, all the buzzwords, etc., and they're going to bring value, no doubt. But there's also a part of it, which is the discipline of refining the existing software, making it work. And it may not be as glossy or as shiny, but it's definitely necessary, and it's definitely part of the whole equation. To make these more immersive or emerging technologies, they or generate actual value. So I think that's a lot of investment should go into that as well. As it is also emerging. The first mobile phone and the mobile phone we have today, they're not the same thing, but they're definitely based on the same principles or same idea anyway.
Absolutely. Aljosja, did you have a comment? Or, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I like the previous comments a lot in terms of the way you got all these new technologies, but somehow they all have to work together. So you need to find a way to make them interoperable. And also you need to find, I remember when blockchain came out, people were starting to say, yeah, there's going to be one ledger to rule them all, and the reality is, I would say, pretty much different. So we're now implementing all these new technologies, and also we have all the legacy systems, and in the book we call that a hybrid world, and somehow you need to develop applications that fit this hybrid world. You cannot expect that everybody will move the latest flavor of technology, but you need to use technology where it's actually useful. If I look at our blockchain projects, I would say blockchain plays a very important part as it produces a number of proofs and allows us to validate data, but we're also making use of cloud platforms and other technologies. And in order to make that work, we need to get data about an invoice or packing list coming from the ERP system. And that is this hybrid world, and making that interoperable, I think that's going to be the major challenge. And I think in order to solve that, the cross-industry collaboration is really key to make that work. And if you look at, for example, electronic bill of lading, that's not only a document for a carrier, it's also a document for a bank. It's a collateral for a loan. And the only way that you can optimize that whole process is if you take into consideration the role it plays within the carrier and within the bank.
So I think a couple of the key takeaways from this part of the discussion, one was the technology needs to be very solution oriented. We had specific problems that we were dealing with in COVID, during COVID, we see some of those same issues and challenges that are going to go on beyond COVID. The question is, how do you use technology to be specific and solve specific problems and use the technology to actually solve those problems? The second piece that I think a few of you touched on was the interoperability of software, the ability to actually collaborate. And the place that we see that the most and where the biggest pain is in logistics. So if we can switch over to the next slide, I'd like to kind of jump to the next part of the discussion around the logistics side of things and really start to dig into that. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So on the logistics side, Rob, I don't know if you want to start us off on logistics. What are some of the challenges that we're facing and how tech has actually helped?
I mean, COVID aside, the challenges aren't new. And in fact, I would challenge my colleagues here to say that a lot of the new tech that we're emerging isn't really that new. So if we think about the rise of the digital broker or the digital forwarder, or even, no offense, Eric, visibility, right? The only difference is venture capital. These are old ideas that have been running in the supply chain for 20 years. I'm old enough to remember my first project in supply chain was end-to-end visibility. So it's not new. What's new is that venture capital is here, which is exciting. So we have an opportunity to do something new. But a business that used to run on a razor-thin margin or was not viable is not made viable by venture capital. These businesses are growing and they're attracting a lot of attention. So I would challenge us to keep our eye on the prize and look for emerging technology that's going to make a meaningful difference, not only to the people that work there, but the people that work in the supply chain, because there's a lot that we can do to make this industry a lot better.
Right. Can we talk about a specific example where we've seen some of that, from your experience, and the rest of the panelists jump in? Because one of the areas that come to my mind from technology and how it's actually impacted logistics and cost is around the disruptive retail, where you started to see these entities that are popping up that are trying to do 30-minute, 15-minute delivery. That speed has been a huge driver for innovation and change. And that's actually required a lot of technology, because now I can't guess. I can't get it wrong. I don't have the time or the ability to fix it anymore. I have to get it right the first time, and I have to deliver it on time. Otherwise, I lose my business. So some of these disruptive models that have come into the market with the new retail space, especially delivering to consumers in a shorter time frame, have driven some of the requirement or need for the technology. So any other examples or anything else you can add?
I can jump in with an example. It's more CPG, I guess, than retail. But I was talking to one of our customers is Starbucks, and the way she's the director of global logistics. She's a really interesting person. We were having I learned a lot in our conversation. Let's just say that. And she's talking about this process of, she goes, they call it bean to cup, right? So they are concerned about every shipment, every component of the process, from when it's a bean to when it gets into the consumer's cup. And she was talking through some of the challenges, and she was essentially saying, look, we get this data and we have to do things very forensically. I would have a team of 15 or 20 people running through hundreds and thousands of lines of orders and of shipments and of inventory, and just really struggling to make sense of it. And by the time they did, that information was old. It was maybe a day old, maybe it was 2 days old. And she was like, Eric, we're just making bad decisions all over the place. We're sending things to where they don't need to go. We're not sending things to places where they're really required. We actually thought, because of demand in a specific region, that we over-indexed there, and then made another mistake at some of our East Coast stores. So she's just kind of talking about this, and I think I like the analogy of bean to cup, because you think about how many different components sit there and how much information is available to you at all those specific stages. And for her, we were talking a little bit about why she was so focused on that real-time visibility, but it was not only just making my team more efficient and not having them run through hundreds and thousands of lines of information to make decisions, but beyond that, just being able to say, I know how to manage my inventory. I know how to spend my money better. She's like, you can actually spend money and end up reducing your costs when you are thinking about investing in technology. So I just remember that conversation. I have a couple other conversations I've had recently that I'm happy to add, but yeah, that was one that jumped out.
Sure, just wanted to open up to our virtual panelists as well. Any thoughts or any comments on this piece of it?
Yeah, I think money is one thing. When I told the course this year, I told the supply chain students that we are in a perfect storm right now. It's not only COVID, it's not only Brexit, it's not only politics. But we also have these new technologies that are now really mature. I mean, I went to university and people explained to me that what AI was. And if you look at it, it was a very simple rule engine. And now we have algorithms. The algorithms themselves, they come from the 1970s and the 1980s, but we have now implemented them into software, and that allows us to do amazing stuff. And it's mature technology. It's not this kind of Fisher-Price software that I was looking at when I went to university in the early 90s. And on top of that, we also have now abundance of data. And if you put that all together, then that is the perfect storm we are right in. And money is being drawn towards that solving that perfect storm. So I think that what we now see is everything coming together, and that's I believe will dramatically change the way we run supply chains for the next 5 years.
Great, thank you. Emmanuel, was there anything else that you wanted to add, or?
I think just add to that, you know, a number of external requirements. I mean, having real-time visibility to make better decisions, but the fact that the data also has other applications. It's not only for one person or one division of a company to use this data, it's also to be used by the compliance division, it is to be used by the finance division, as Aljosja also, you know, explained with the bill of lading, which is also a document banking for the loan. And because the data has so many applications, that will basically speed up, or we will need to speed up interoperability and data gathering and analysis and cleaning the data for all these many purposes. So definitely interesting, and they sort of probably going to be a push to implement these sooner rather than later. And logistics is a very important place, because obviously this is where products are shifting, you know, ownership, they're shifting who's holding the products. This is where counterfeit, you know, injection of counterfeit products take place. This is where diversion takes place. There's a number of issues in this part of the whole process of products which need to be tackled. Super interesting times. Back to the technologies that we are investing in these days.
So the one thing I did want to bring up as we're talking through logistics is the modalities, right? So we've seen the modes change. We've seen technology, how it's influenced it. We used to deliver on bicycles. Now we're delivering on electric bikes. We used to deliver on trucks. Now we're delivering on autonomous vehicles, all the way to the door of the customer and everywhere in between. The ability to actually integrate all these different pieces, how is that actually impacting? And where are the elements of technology that are really influencing a lot of these? Obviously, there's vision systems, there's AI, there's other pieces, but being able to track this, because the speed has changed, how is technology, and where are you seeing kind of the biggest challenges from a technology standpoint as we move through COVID into a post-COVID era? Go ahead, Manju.
So it is really the broader humanity comprehending the power of technology that we have, if I were to start with, right? For example, if you take the large enterprise that we work with, they have tens and thousands of supply chain workers at many different levels, all the way from an SVP to a person picking the boxes. Everybody is using their brain in some ways to make simple decisions to complex decisions. Decision making happens to be one of the most expensive resources used in supply chain. Now, for that, the dependency is the data itself, right? Now, there's a lot of things that have been thrown for market awareness around machine learning, AI, data insights, data intelligence, as if like the intention was never to be intelligent, right? If you actually look at it, there is always an attempt, but these technologies become cheaper and faster. I've done demand forecasting for 20 years. There are only 3 things in it. You put data, you run a lot of math, you get an output. If the planner trusts it, he'll use it, otherwise he's going to override it. That behavior has not changed 20 years back. It has not changed today. It will not change in future. But what you can do is if you run more math than the human can run in his head, and if the answer turns out to be better compared to his plan versus actual, there is no going back. That's the inflection point we are in, which means whenever you hear about these technologies, demystify this in your own way. So what does it really mean? Now, what happens to play a role during COVID is there's a lot of human psychology playing a role in demand forecasting. That's affecting supply planning, that's affecting your logistics, it was all tied to your customer expectation. And there's a bullwhip effect. On one cycle, you see things stacking up at layer after layer in the supply chain node, and the other reverse effect when it happens maybe 18 months down the line, then they're doing reverse effect of the same thing. But whether it's the forward or reverse, you need to adopt this technology in a meaningful way. Now, also, I think one of the panelists made a point. These technologies are not new. People have been using search engines and contextual information in different ways in their personal life and retail or searches and all those things. When you apply the same thing to an enterprise in these buckets of plan, make, source, deliver, and help humans make less decisions, make these decisions autonomous, you will start seeing KPIs move. It is, if I were to summarize this, it's essentially change management is the hardest part. The more people understand at every level, the kind of transformation they can bring is quite significant.
Thank you. Actually, that's a great segue into our next section, which is talking about planning. We can switch over to the next slide. So in planning, what we're seeing is obviously you talk about demand planning and forecasting. We're also seeing replenishment and everything else. But along with that, the tie-ins, the ability to actually tie a plan to your actuals and what's going on in the field, specifically in the logistics side of things with blockchain in terms of if I have a recall, what do I do? Where do I go? Who are the sources? Where did the source come from? And how do I pull it out of my supply chain? Being able to track and trace all of that and then being able to execute on it. The speed at which, again, all of this is changing, the ability to tie a plan, which was usually kind of a more virtual thing, which then was executed, is something that's a little bit more tied to reality, where the planning cycle is now going from the hours, days, or weeks, or months that they were to the minutes. I need to plan, and it, like you said, Manju, iteratively make decisions on the fly. So where do we see some of the biggest challenges, the innovation that you've seen from a logistics standpoint or from an end-to-end supply chain standpoint?
I think it ties together with what the last question you asked too, which is, where autonomous trucking and all, how is this affecting, right? So there's a negative effect. If I'm a new truck driver thinking about a career in trucking, am I worried that autonomous trucks are gonna wipe me out? And if I'm planning my supply chain, am I thinking about the ability to get to source in Asia and bring? Should I be thinking about sourcing in Mexico? Should I be thinking about robotics and sourcing it locally? I was really heartened the last panel talking about the global supply chain, because I feel like the good thing that can happen about the good side is that we can really re-enfranchise many independent players who participate in the global supply chain but don't get the credit they deserve. And the food guys were talking about that farmer who's showing that his beans are high quality. I hope he gets paid more someday, right? And I think when we think about the trucker in Indonesia who is doing a very important thing, which is pulling the dray move into a local micro market in a boom town like Jakarta, I hope he gets paid more too if he does a great job and digitizes that delivery. So I think there's a pro and a con to technology. We have to keep a close eye on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's easy to forget that there are actually people behind the trucks that we're all tracking and looking at, or that the fact that, and I've seen a bunch of examples now about, because of the driver shortage, there's kind of the pendulum maybe is swinging the other way from maybe starting to try to encourage people to drive, or showing appreciation rather than slapping them with a late fee when they arrive at a specific location, or maybe even having a coffee and donuts for when they arrive after an 18-hour shift. So there's the human elements of supply chain, which I think you were getting to, which is important. I kind of took your question and thought about it in a little bit of a different way. Just again, based on a conversation I had recently with a customer of ours at CMPC. They're actually down in Santiago, Chile, and they're really a forest, pulp and paper, lumber and obviously there's been a lot of challenges around lumber. We're talking about real time and the requirement for not minutes, not days, not weeks, but minutes, even down to the second. So one of the things that we've been working on them with is that I thought was really interesting is she's like, well, her name's Costanza also. She's super smart. I learned a bunch from her. And she's like, the problem isn't just us knowing where our ocean cargo is, or where our different shipments are, or where our orders are. The problem is our customers, because they're not just providing simply an end product. They're providing a product that then someone will turn into an end product. It has all these downstream effects. And for her, it's not just them knowing where my shipments are, where the different ocean liners are, so that they can know and make smart business decisions. But beyond that, they're actually creating a portal for their customers so they can have real-time information as well. So it's that downstream effect of, it's not just, hey, I'm a company and I want to know something instantly. It's, you maybe have thousands of different customers who would also be impacted by those delays. And instead of your phone ringing off the hook, or you getting 45 emails before 8 o'clock in the morning from them, getting status checks and information about where that is, you're able to use technology that is accessible and provides information that they would never otherwise be able to get. And that's, when I think about solving problems, I think that's where we're starting to find the right balance.
That's great. Want to open it up to the panels? I know Emanuel or Aljosja.
I think in terms of one of the challenges that we typically bump into talking to large organizations in the supply chain is that you mentioned recall, and this is a very obvious sort of use case, but it's also one of the use cases that show that if you don't have the level of interoperability, that you can share data down your supply chain, both upstream and downstream, create this holistic view of which product or which resources has turned into which product. And Eric's example with the wood is a really good one, because there's a number of companies along the route from a sort of raw material to a finished item. And then one of the challenges that we typically bump into is not one of technology or the lack of technology. It's actually the challenge of data sharing. I don't mean technical challenge. It's the inherent problems of sharing all of your information with everyone. Obviously, it may seem like a good idea and it will solve a number of problems, but it will also create a level of visibility which may not, for the individual actor, be desired. So there's a sort of like a pull in the opposite direction, saying, it's fine with the technology and that you can bring this level of visibility, but it will also allow our competitors to know more about us, which will, potentially, bring us out of business. And this is something that needs to be fixed, maybe not only by technology, but of course also by technology. It means of making sure that the right amount of data is shared, not more than what is needed, so that we can establish the kind of data lines needed for the hard problems, the problems that cut through many organizations, while at the same time shielding them from uneven competition or other sort of negative side effects of that otherwise positive behavior.
Right, and I think just to add, any other comments? Just to add to what you just said, Emanuel, I think one of the areas is also as you start, so visibility is a key attribute. The question is, how can we provide everyone in that supply chain the visibility that they need? The other aspect of it is also providing what they need. Like you said, we don't want to share necessarily more, and that it is a technical challenge. And that is where technology is being used in terms of being able to just share what is specifically needed without giving away too much information about what is being transported or what's being carried and what the costs associated are. Although that information is important, providing visibility end to end for that information may not be required. The other aspect of it is also the chasm between the planning ability and the execution. We know things will go wrong, right? I can plan, I can have the best algorithms, I can have the best solutions, I can do all the planning as often as I want. When I start to execute, whatever I do, there will be problems. The question is, how do I fill that gap? And if I have the right information, being able to use that information effectively. So that's where I think we're seeing a lot of the technology. I don't know if there were any other comments related to that. I know, Manju, we spoke earlier, and you had some thoughts.
If you look at traditional last 30 years or so, or even maybe longer, organizations have divided themselves as broadly planning and execution. They're literally different departments, sometimes different softwares, different databases. They don't talk to each other. Now, what has happened over a period of time is like humans make mistakes during the planning cycles. And the softwares are rules that are embedded and they're running. Now, in real world, doesn't necessarily run as per plan, right? So now, whatever correction happens in execution needs to be a systematic flow. And if it doesn't flow, it gets built as bias in the demand planner, supply planner, the logistics planner, the various folks. And that bias never goes away unless the person is working in that company. Now, one of the paradigm shifts that the companies are going through is, how can I institutionalize the good aspect of decision making? How can I reduce the bias by correlating more information? Now, going back to the previous point that you mentioned, which is around the visibility, many times people think visibility is dashboards. That's the most common thing. Just show me more information, more dashboard. That's not what people are mostly asking. They're not probably expressing it. They're saying when things happen in a physical world, what I'm not sitting and watching with my live eye, tell me what I should be doing if it affects my top line, bottom line, or SLA, or my customer expectation. Also recommend what action and show me the evidence, whether it's a visual camera or a text or a barcode or an RFID input. That's what people are asking for. But again, it's an evolution process. Customers are going to ask in a more mature way in 18 months or 24 months from now. But in essence, when you're thinking about planning and execution, planning is no good if you're not close to the actual execution of your truck moving, a box being picked, or somebody ordering based on an impulse on a retail store, and that having an effect on a supplier in Indonesia, let's say, right? So this, in other words, we are telling the same thing in a different way, right? Make supply chain more closer to real time. Be closely connected to the real world, physical world. Things are going to change. The way lipsticks were sold 2 years back is not the way it's sold today, because the customer behavior and expectations have changed.
So I think Aljosja kind of touched on this earlier, which is it's a perfect storm. We've got the right technology, we've got the capabilities, we have the hardware that can support that near real time. What used to be run on a supercomputer is run in a pocket phone or a mobile device today. Having that ability, we can get closer, we can get more real time. We've got IoT and other capabilities that are giving us real time information, and being able to harvest that information, being able to utilize that information effectively in real time, doing the planning and using the algorithms and everything that we've got with the cloud base. And so regardless of where you are in the world, you can still access the information, but being able to share that effectively is one of the areas. Any other closing comments before we?
Only just one of the things we often hear is around the amount of people across the business that will want to access this type of technology, only because you spoke about silos earlier, and we've been talking a little bit about machine learning and data science and why technology is useful there. It provides increased access to things that were very specialized in the past. Like that's specific for data science or machine learning. It means if you have a technology or a software application that uses data science, you don't necessarily need to have a PhD in being able to build these types of algorithms. Instead, you're able to reap those benefits and to make accurate decisions. But beyond that, I think what we were just getting to at the close, which is one of the reasons I started nodding my head at you, was I think the focus for a long time, at least, and I have a very insular lens, so I'm happy to be challenged, is we need to know where things are, we need to be more accurate, and we need to make decisions based on that. But I think what we were just getting to is it's actually, we like to think of this as from see to do. So now I can see it, now I need to be able to do it. But I think the next phase, which I think is what you were getting to, is around, well, could you tell me what to do? based on all the information and all the data and all the things you're collecting. And that's when all of a sudden, and you're still, as an individual who's an expert, you may decide that that's actually not the right decision. But it's always nice to have an option and a recommendation that you can then divert from. And I think when we talk about VC and new investments and around, we're going to see more around the execution recommendation component because I feel like from visibility, we're at least getting there.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add briefly that you mentioned IoT, you mentioned other hardware devices. Hardware doesn't move freight, people do. Yep. And if you want to move from visibility to seeing to doing, you have to connect to the people who are doing. And those people aren't ELD devices and they're not IoT devices, they're real humans really doing work. And so that's the challenge of emerging technology.
I just wanted to pause here for questions if there are any. I don't know if there were any online as well, but.
Hello. Hi, I'm Parth. I am a student from the MS in Global Supply Chain in Cohort 9. And I had only one question from you. So we just highlighted that decision-making is one of the most expensive resources in the supply chain as of now, right? So why are we trying to decentralize that process? Like, for example, even yesterday, we had a conversation about the blockchain and the use of blockchain in the supply chain. So why are we focusing on decentralizing the decision making, the data collection? Because at the end of the day, if we decentralize the decision making in the supply chain, then it would be a little, wouldn't you think it'll be a little more unorganized or a little more, what the correct word would be? It would be a little more out of sync with each other, and because supply chains these days are very complex, needlessly complex, if I may, how would blockchain benefit? Because as I see it, because I completely agree with you is that decision making is one of the most expensive tasks in the supply chain and one of the riskiest tasks in supply chain because as COVID highlighted that it's one of the most fragile industries, the supply chain industry, because we forgot to build resilience. That's why. And wouldn't you say that implementing blockchains would make it more expensive and more fragile and more out of sync?
I'll open it up to the audience.
What is it? Is the final question, will blockchain make it harder or worse rather than better?
Wouldn't implementing the supply chain make it more expensive because it will make more variables in the decision-making process? You are basically decentralizing the decision makers. And that's why there are more number of them. And because they are not centralized, they are more out of sync and more expensive.
Yeah, I was just curious. I just wanted to hear it. I feel like we have a blockchain expert who I'd much rather have jump in on it than me. I can add. I'm more of a blockchain wannabe than a blockchain expert. I think he'd probably be the best person to ask that. I just want to make sure I heard it.
Maybe the person that wrote the book on it.
Yeah, the guy who wrote the book. He's right there.
Yeah, I'll give a crack at this question. I think managing the supply chain, since you run the supply chain as if it is a single entity. And you don't try to optimize individual parts, but you try to optimize the whole chain. You can do that in two ways. You can do that through a dominant member, and that is very few companies on this planet have that position. The company I think closest to it is Zara, which is a big textile company in Spain. And they have their own factories and their own shops, and they arrange everything in between themselves. And that's a fully centralized supply chain, and the models you can apply there and the data they have will result in optimal solutions. But this is one of the few examples that I know. And if you think about it, it takes 29 parties to ship a container from China to Rotterdam, then you already have a decentralized world. And how do you want to coordinate that? How do you coordinate if there's nobody in charge? And there's only one way to do that. This is through collaboration or collaborative coordination. And I think all our old models before blockchain were based on this hierarchical model, and we try to, in a lot of cases, put a round peg to a square hole. And right now with blockchain, we have an architecture that actually underpins decentralized decision making. And I agree with you, it will not be as efficient as a highly centralized model, because mathematically that's not possible. But as Emanuel already said, it is about sharing certain data in a secure way, and that is where blockchain can play a very important role. So I'm very confident that blockchain can play a very important role in creating a coordinated system that is more efficient than what we have right now. And one thing I would like to add to that is that if we look at how we do planning, today's world, we know that things can change within a minute, yet we still have planning algorithms that makes demand planning for 3 months. And then we break it down into smaller buckets of a month. And then the world doesn't work like that anymore. And I think that's where there's a very interesting challenge where also blockchain technology can help us to really coordinate transactional level, and that can really speed up the way processes are being conducted.
Manju, you wanted to add to that?
This concept of centralized, decentralized is a cyclical aspect that you will see. Mainframes, centralized. Client server, decentralized. Internet, you can debate it as centralized or decentralized. Cloud, centralized. Machine learning model, run on cloud, run on edge, centralized, decentralized. So the point is not whether centralization or decentralization is good. Each of them have their place. Even depending on whether you look at blockchain or cloud or AI, we can debate that as the best thing in the world. But rarely is the case when you're solving a supply chain problem, the answer is always going to be in the middle. You cannot say, okay, I'll bring in cloud and AI, I'm going to transform everything, I'll bring in blockchain, I'll transform everything. You're solving part of the problem, but you always have to step back. I think some of the panelists also said, what problem are you solving? What efficiencies are you trying to bring? What's the best optimal technology that will fit and coexist, which is accepted by your people? At the end of it, it's always the people. If they don't accept, it doesn't matter how much we debate about the greatest technology out there. So and enterprises have a way of making optimal decisions, right? They look at everything and they evolve this based on the problems they're solving.
Thank you. I think we're almost out of time, but I wanted to give everyone a minute to kind of share their last minute thoughts and takeaways from this discussion. So Manju, you want to start us off?
COVID or no COVID, right? The things are going to evolve. Humans are, one of the best things is humans adapt. Like how humans are adapting to driverless cars, supply chain will get autonomous in its own way. Not fully autonomous, we always have a role, but we are going to get better in terms of how we use our technologies. It's terrible if people go and say that Lean Six Sigma is bad or just-in-time is bad or all the things that have done so much good in the world, to say that they are bad just because that's part of media hype, or they don't fully understand what they're talking about, if I can say that. So it's important to know that humans evolve, and this is the biggest disruption probably since the World War. So obviously you're going to expect a lot of challenges and questions come in, but the thought leaders in this room and the people who are graduating, you have to go with a fresh perspective, absorb all these things. Don't take everything in the literal sense, use your own judgment, because you are going to innovate and change the supply chain.
No, just let you guys know we're in for a wild ride next year. I was at an investor conference last week in New York, and one of the investors, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm in supply chain. Oh, supply chain, so sexy right now. And the amount of investment coming our way is going to be phenomenal. And those of you who are not doing startups, if you're working with startups, choose carefully. Think it through. Work with the startups that you think will have a positive impact on the world and on the industry, because we in the startup, we take that little bit of business you give us and we blast it to the investors and we use it to get more venture capital, and we will get big. We'll get big like Project 44 got big.
I think I just kind of, I think it's really, it's a good point. I would just probably, I was going to say something else, but I think where you're coming at is maybe the right perspective. The coolest technology does not always solve the most important problem, right? And when you're thinking about what types of decisions to make around where you're going to work or what you're going to focus on, it's about solving the bigger problems, not necessarily the coolest demonstration of a thing. And that kind of goes back to what we've been talking about all day today, which is we love to talk about technology. I've worked in tech my entire professional career. I am a strong proponent of technology, but I mean, we've talked about, this is a people business at the core, and people can use technology to solve problems. It's not just technology and that's kind of, that's it, right? It's not about throwing more technology at an issue. And I think there's going to be, as you said, there's going to be a lot of new investments, and there's going to be a lot of new companies, and there's going to be a lot of new funding, and it's really about doing the diligence and doing the homework around what the problem is they're trying to solve, why what they're doing is maybe unique or different than somebody else, and how they're going to enhance an existing process. And again, it's always something that a person is going to have to use and benefit from. So it's easy to forget when we talk about emerging technology, but it's a good point.
Thank you. Aljosja, if you want to give us your parting comments.
Words was mentioned, was already mentioned a couple of times. I think supply chain management is probably now the sexiest course you can take in any university or MBA. Coming from a time when working in logistics was something you wouldn't even say at a party, that's a big change. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for right now to really make a big impact in the industry. And I think the most important part is for professionals that you need to be proficient in finance, to be able to talk to the CFO of a company if you're a supply chain specialist. You need to be able to understand IT at a very detailed level in order to be able to converge with IT people and also your own analysis and run your own models. And I think you need to really understand the nitty-gritty part of logistics. You need to understand Incoterms. You need to understand that bill of lading is a negotiable document. And I think that is a very important human aspect that will remain critical to the way you run supply chains.
Thank you. I think, did we lose Emanuel? Looks like we created a new technology where we cloned you this year. On the screen here, we've got two of you, but I just want to thank the panelists for being here. Thank you for letting us be part of this conference and sharing some of the information. It's been an exciting discussion, and appreciate all the insights and the thoughts that you bring to the table. Thank you again.